All right, what it is, good fighters. Today we got connection, intention, and purpose with Dr. Nash, Dr. Gates. If you like feet, it's your episode today.
Whoa. Hope people take that with the right intention.
Right, I mean, they better get your mind out of the gutters, people.
Definitely. Getting that mind out of the gutters is essential. Out
of the gutters is key. So, but in other words, foot and ankle, man. It's been, well, first of all, you told me that you're walking to work barefoot now, right?
Honestly, maybe I need to start doing that, but I've just been taking my dog. Whenever I go on walks with him, I just do it barefoot. Yeah. So,
right.
Growing up, I used to go around barefoot a lot more than
right.
We kind of lived out in the country and whatnot. But since then, it hasn't really been anything that I've been doing super often.
Right. You want to talk about connection, intention, and purpose. A lot of connection when you're walking barefoot.
Definitely.
You're intentionally walking barefoot. And I feel like when you walk barefoot, maybe you got a little bit more purpose because you got to watch where you step and not on rocks, right? So
100%. I noticed that last night walking around.
Dude, I got some baby feet though. If I walk barefoot, especially on asphalt and stuff, it'll wreck me.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to build up.
Build up to?
Yeah. Trying to let those feet start to adapt to have a little bit better resistance towards I don't know.
Right.
Little minor inconveniences like little small rocks.
Or little pebbles.
Yeah.
I need to do that.
I don't know. So it's been going really well, honestly.
That's awesome. That is brought to you by today, Dr. Nash, with the influence, the drop-in.
The Barefoot Walker.
Source, the Barefoot Walker. Our dealer in Barefoot Walker. That's going to be on your business card now.
It might need to be. I don't know if anybody wants to see him, though. I've got some, dogs.
Oh, I don't mean, feet pics.
Okay,
I mean, just the...
I don't want to see him.
You're not selling those yet?
No.
Man, you got to get on that.
I have heard stories of people out there selling, people on Instagram asking for their socks and really weird stuff.
Freaking weird stuff.
Yeah,
man.
Psychos out there. We love you guys, but
hey,
weirdos out there.
Keep it classy, y'all. Keep it classy. Yeah, dude. I think it's been one of those things where we talk about going through school and Mally's courses and different things and learning human biomechanics and just becoming more human in general. It's been one of those things that I have been very intrigued by. And seen some good production in my own life as far as ankle injuries and different things like that by walking more minimalistic, maybe not barefoot outside, but more barefoot as a whole. So I got some stuff today, and I know that you got some stuff today too. I'm going to be bringing some stuff from actually a guy who's an evolutionary biologist.
Dang,
discussing barefoot biomechanics and everything.
I love it. And a little bit what I've got is just kind of some drop-ins that I had on some of my walks where I was just, just kind of trying to reduce as much stimulus and just take in nature, being really connected with what I was doing at that time with my dog. So I think you're right.
Yeah, I'm ready for it. And I think one thing that we got to point out right off the bat is a quarter of your skeleton. It's in your feet and ankles.
Yes, sir. 52.
Don't neglect it.
52 bones right there.
I think that's one of the wildest things. One of the wildest things.
It is. And, it's really amazing to see the amount of relief that can happen, not just in your foot and ankle, but up the entire kinetic chain of movement.
Yeah.
You have somebody who's walking more balanced, more coordinated, and with less stress, right?
Yeah. So, well, I don't know about you guys, but whenever somebody comes into the office, I don't know, the adjustment room is kind of like a dojo, I guess, because instantly they take their shoes off because they know they're going to get their feet adjusted and everything like that. And so, instant connection there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The office, so.
One thing I like that, obviously we follow a bunch of other fellow DC's chiropractors and whatnot. And Dr. Jeremy Brook, one of his initial things that you do when you literally come into the actual practice is you take your shoes off. And
I love it.
I really do love that. Obviously not.
Right.
I don't. And the thing is, most people don't have perfect feet. So some people are self-conscious about them, but really.
Right. Yeah.
We're all kind of in that same boat. Feet aren't really meant to be pretty.
They're not.
They're tools for ambulation, right? They're tools to get around.
Make feet tools again.
Yeah, there you go. There you
What
go.
would be the slogan?
Yeah, I love that. Put that on a t-shirt.
Oh my gosh. I know Dr. Zev does that too. You know, he's walking barefoot all the time in his practice.
Nice.
And not just like barefoot with socks, but like barefoot.
Yeah.
And it sets the precedence, I think, too. People might walk in, people get, I don't want to say groomed. That's not the right word. They're used to, if you set a precedence in your office, they're used to it. And there's one thing that can help build connection. It's one small, like very minute thing, maybe on the grand. Yeah, program is a little bit better, but it's one small thing that can be utilized to maybe make it a little bit more beneficial in your office to build connection.
100%.
So why don't you start us off with something, dude?
All right.
And then we can dive in because I got a couple research studies that are by Lieberman, some other people that I think would be cool to dive into in the middle here.
All right, so you gotta forgive me a little bit. I kind of went on a tangent here, and I just kind of sometimes I get in like a trance, and the fingers are just flying, and stuff's just flowing. So
don't ever apologize for that flow, my man.
Right,
is this some thoughts?
THOTS? Yeah. Oh yeah. THOTS.
Okay. THOTS. Fire alarm. Sound it off.
All right. Yep. Get the fire alarm sounding off a little bit. But, so I really initially started with a question. So really I was just thinking about like insulators. So insulation, more along the lines of like electricity, because there are certain insulators between electrical current. But I was thinking, where in life do you have insulators from connection? And we all know that the earth emits a frequency, and one of our greatest tools to connect, just like our hands, are our feet. So what if one of the reasons a majority of people out there feel so disconnected is from truly never making a connection with one of the greatest and most abundant and ancient forms of connection with the earth? Most shoes act as an insulator or barrier to the frequency and connecting to the ground, much like how soundproofing a room works. Think about how many people out there from the time they're born hardly ever make true foot-to-soil contact with the ground in their lifetime. What if that's one of the greatest reasons people can go through life feeling so disconnected from themselves, their neighbors, their environments, and their lives? Because they have been conditioned to be disconnected from the great conductor of the earth.
Ooh.
Earth is a prehistoric source of positive universal intelligence communication with the human system. I would argue that there is an innate intelligence inhabiting the earth itself, and when you can truly connect with someone, you're not just educationally connected, but innately as well. So to connect with the earth is to tap into the innate of the planet and to drop into the connection of who you be.
Holy crap. Big O-T-S, baby. The big conductor. I like that though, dude.
Because I mean, I don't know if I'm sure you've heard that in school too, or in some way, shape, or form about like the frequencies, right? That the planet puts out.
Yeah.
That's literally part of like the magnetic protection of the earth from like solar flares and all that. So that's just something that I was kind of thinking about as I was doing some of my walks, is how many people really are out there that never even, most people that are born in like a city environment really don't ever make, foot to soil contact,
right?
Unless they seek it out. And I think that's
especially in a concrete jungle, man.
Yeah. And I think that's an important factor, because I mean, we almost kind of have like an internal GPS system a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's an important tool that can kind of get unprogrammed out of people. The more we kind of lose touch with not just like nature, but just some of our like instinctual tools that we were born and gifted with throughout just years and generations of development.
Right. I think one thing that is a portion of that is not just getting barefoot, inside your own home, but also on the outside, because I think it's not being barefoot on a man-made object. So that I would include that in sidewalks and different things like that. I would say that it's definitely better to get that conduction if you're outside on like actual rocks or grass or dirt. But the mental image that comes to mind is, let's say you're in Iowa, right, on the ground.
Yep.
And you are connecting with the frequency of the earth. I'm in Grand Rapids, or let's say I'm on Lake Michigan on the beach, connecting with the frequency of the earth. Both of us in that moment are essentially connected at that time. In a space where I don't think you can get that anywhere else, because if you have a shoe, or if you're on man-made objects or different things like that, you're not at it doesn't conduct the same. Obviously, forces don't connect the same, that transduction. And I just think it's a cool imagery to have two people standing on the earth and being a whole one of that one frequency. Yeah, like that. Yep, connecting.
That tether.
Yep. Not to say that, I mean, I have no obviously validity to back that up, but I'm sure that there's some type of the collective that would be a part of that too.
Yeah. I think that there's I always think of tree roots. That it's actually like a huge communication tool for not just trees, but collections of trees and forests.
Right.
They connect through their roots.
Right.
And I think to get connected to the actual the actual soil of where you live is pretty undervalued.
Oh, for sure.
Obviously most people don't educationally understand that or feel that, but I think there's a certain level of relaxation and
right.
Kind of not just decompression, but feeling of not being just some visitor of wherever you are, but actually being a part of the community, and not just in the aspect of people, but the surrounding nature and other life around you.
Right.
Because it's not
even down to the smallest bacteria.
Right.
Virus. That's cool.
The diversity of life around us is just so abundant all the time.
Right.
And I think a lot of people get really caught up in that life's just strictly a human experience, and it's not. So to really be able to connect with other forms of life constantly with a lot of just literally an abundance of time where we're just literally standing there or moving, because moving in itself is a transmission of energy. So give and take between you putting force in and getting force out of the ground, and actually communicating with the earth in some way, shape, and form. I think that's important too.
Yeah, 100%. And I think if we tap more into that, it'd be intrigued with how much more, they talk a lot about depression or anxiety and how it relates to sometimes the sun, but I wonder how much more, I don't know if there's a study out there. I'm sure there maybe is, but what that would look like. If anybody in the Good Fighter community wants to, the Fight Club, we found it.
We'll be dropping that soon. Everybody listening, you're a part of the Fight Club.
Part of the Fight Club.
Justin Keith, what a great idea.
Money maker. That's what's up, man. Well, I want to get into some of this stuff with the evolutionary biologist. So his name is Daniel E Lieberman. He's a professor of biological sciences at Harvard University. And I think it was the article's talking about how decades ago he published this paper that showed running in cushioned sneakers encourages people to hit the ground harder than running barefoot. And it kind of sent this shockwave of I don't want to say confusion, but maybe controversy, especially at the time when more people are trying to get thicker shoes, or Nike's building better shoes for running and whatnot. So he said he started running barefoot as an experiment and kept doing it because he just enjoyed it. And every spring after running the Boston Marathon, he would trade his traditional sneakers for a pair of minimal shoes or no footwear at all. And he discusses how the more he was running barefoot, the more callous his foot became, but he could still feel the ground really well, which is really, counterintuitive to what you might think. You would think, oh, I have more callus, then I should feel the ground less. But with the calluses, he actually was able to contact the ground, and he noticed that more people in ancient times, one of his thought processes were, well, if you are in ancient times, you couldn't really afford to lose that sensation with the ground. So there's got to be a reason behind it, and you can still transmit forces. So he kind of conducted some of these studies with his colleagues, and it found that calluses that thicken because you're walking barefoot more often, that there's actually no trade-off in the sensation for extra protection. So you actually are able to.
It's a win-win.
The hard surface that your callus transmits those mechanical forces through the foot into the nerves, deeper into the skin, that were equally as well as like an unprotected sole or like maybe a non-calloused foot. So they didn't find anything that changed that process. And I thought that was really cool. I was like, dude, the fact that you build up that callus and it doesn't change how you have sensation to the ground, the body's freaking smart, dude. Because he talks about there's no viscosity to the calluses. So the forces from the ground go right into the deeper layers of the skin and you don't lose any information. People with thick calluses were sensitive to vibrations to those with no calluses. And then he compares that to wearing a larger shoe. Because I mean, even now I hate when I wear shoes that have that really, really thick sole. And I don't know if it's because I want to be more connected with an aid or what, I don't know. But he says the energy that gets shoot up your legs is about 3 times bigger in a cushioned shoe than your barefoot.
Wow.
And he makes this he throws out this theoretical possibility that the extra impact was behind the doubling of the rates of knee arthritis since World War II. So since World War II, we've had double the amounts of knee arthritis. And he didn't have any solid evidence. He even says, I don't have any solid evidence to support that, but it is his theory that that's a potential, that those shockwaves that ironically, the more, the study kind of goes into it too, which I'll touch on in just a second, but it produces more of that shockwave into the knee or those joints that we don't want to be arthritic, right? So,
right.
So they were doing this study about how foot strike patterns and collision forces differ from what they call shod runners, which is basically a runner that wears a shoe, and then a person that goes barefoot. And it talks about how people that were more likely to be barefoot, they struck more either midfoot or forefront. So think like a sprinter, how they're constantly on the forefoot of their foot instead of the rear heel strike, which is more consistent with long distance runners that are wearing a thicker sole. So they did these studies based on like how much mechanical forces were going through and then how much different that made for potential injuries and different things. So the higher impact was previous studies found that habitual shod runners tend to adopt flatter foot placement when barefoot, then shod, thus reducing stress on the foot, because they found that they had more tibial stress fractures and plantar fasciitis for those that were landing in a heel strike. Which I think is crazy because how much plantar fasciitis do we have today, or how much, shin splints do we have, which realistically could be tibial stress, because all that stress where people are like, especially nowadays, where they're like, oh, I got to lose weight. Let me just go run. Let me go run a couple miles. And they wear this thick Nike New Balance shoe or whatever. And for me too, it makes me think of my dad, like, because he's got some pretty bad knee arthritis right now. And I just remember him training for marathons and different things. He always picked like that thickest sole. And I'm like, man, what if less interference is the better? And he relates that into this article that I was talking about, how actually a shoe is very invasive into how we're supposed to conduct our lives and how we take in the entire world, just like you were talking about. So, and he relates it back to older people, because I don't know about you, but you see older people today, they got the Velcro strap-ons, right, with the thick sole, man, like double thick. I don't even know where they get these shoes at, man. Have you seen those shoes?
No. I mean, some
Shout
of them.
Out to anybody that knows where old people buy their shoes, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're obviously specifically marketed. So wherever
I guess they got to be
older people are going, it's where they're getting their shoes. I don't know. I feel like maybe in Walmart sometimes, but Walmart sometimes gets a bad rap for stuff like that because they do some good stuff with shoes too.
Right.
Yeah, that is nuts, dude. That's wild.
That's pretty crazy. When I was reading that, he obviously equates it back to evolutionary, and we always think we know better. That I think that's a consistent theme from stuff that we've talked about, is we think we know better. We think we need these thick-soled shoes, but in the end run, and I can share about how he talks about with older people in just a second, but how it doesn't pay off. The payoff is not worth it, Right. But we tend to go towards more, you mentioned the feet, and maybe we're like subconsciously ashamed or subconsciously afraid to be judged of our feet. So we wear shoes that also are more appealing to the eye, more aesthetically pleasing.
On the outside, right?
On the outside.
Not who you actually are, or like what your design is. I think the adaptations are very interesting, because obviously we always talk about and know the human body is literally one of its sole purposes is to adapt. So with the adaptation that goes on with having shoes, I think one of the crazy adaptations that you literally just talked about is the difference between the shod runners using more of like a heel strike to like heel to toe off type running style versus somebody who doesn't, having more of like a forefoot strike. And just literally thinking about like the anatomy of the foot and like the dispersion of forces, you have so much better ability to disperse force throughout the forefoot than if you initially make contact with that heel and have that force distributed up your tibia like you're talking about. I think that's a really important aspect of kind of, we lost Gates. Let's see if we can get him back. We got him back. Reel him back in.
We're back.
Sorry.
We're back, baby.
So, like I was saying, I think it really is quite amazing the body's ability to adapt, like we talk about all the time. But one of the adaptations I think that we've collectively made, or at least like in the Western culture, with like the thickness of the soles of shoes, or just like the bed of shoes in general, and talking about the prevalence of knee arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, leading with like a typical stride, heel first, that transmission of forces is going to initially lead up the tibia, right? Opposed to like an unshoed runner with the forefoot lead, the dispersion of forces through the forefoot is going to be a lot more evenly dispersed. And it just has a whole, I mean, like we said, you have 26 bones in each foot. So each of those joints are designed to kind of maneuver, and also like joints take away force from getting just dumped into one little area. So I think that's an important piece of information that guy dropped right there. That was cool.
Yeah, I think just when you dive into that type of biomechanical feedback and how your body can relate it to we're perfectly made, man. We're made to disperse those forces. I'd be interested to know, because obviously with the difference in shoes and different things like that, mile times and sprint times, and how that would change as well. I mean, I'm sure it's more for an increase or like a decreased time when you're wearing shoes, but he does make the case for, well, you can also potentially have more rebound or more nervous system input if you're doing a minimalist shoe. And I think about sprinter shoes, they're not super thick either. Sprinter shoes are pretty thin
because you don't want to lose any of that force.
Right. That ground reaction force. Yeah.
Right. You don't want any of that cushion or insulation to like basically eat that force up.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. That's just like the definition of speed.
There you go.
Putting more force into the ground.
Yep. And he goes into some stuff too with the elderly population, and how as we become older, our feet become more sensitive, or less sensitive, excuse me. And like I said before, we see older people with more cushioned shoes, less feeling. If we have those cushiony shoes, well, then that's leading our elderly population to less adaptation too.
For sure.
And how many falls or
more likely to trip,
likely to trip, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know that sometimes even when I'm walking in the wintertime wearing boots, I'm just more likely to like catch a lip of a sidewalk, right? And it's because I literally am just not used to having that disconnection as large a space between myself and the ground, right?
Right.
So I think by like what you're saying, by the elderly population, just they're desensitized already, or getting to that point where they're just not registering as much of that feedback. To create that gap even more, that's making the problem worse.
Yeah. And I think it makes me think of our body thrives off information, right? And as we get older, we tend to decrease that information
Yeah.
So we're literally losing that information as we age. And if you don't use it, you lose it. And how many people have you adjusted that are maybe a little bit elderly and their feet are just like freaking 2x4,
Dude.
like they become a rigid piece of plank, you know?
It becomes
Yeah,
actually really debilitating for people.
very debilitating, a lot of pain, and I even think in my own, before I started getting my feet and ankles adjusted, I was very rigid. I was very much so like trying to stabilize something and not dispersing the weight properly.
I think a lot
And
of Go ahead.
I was just going to share how I think we talked about this in a previous episode. Just walking to and from school, used to be in a lot of pain, and I tried to get as thick a sole as I could, and it always progressively got worse. Like it never progressively got better, but it wasn't until I started getting my feet adjusted and started getting a thinner sole and more ankle stability to where I felt like, I had really, really bad sprained ankles, but I started gaining even more information and even more ability to. Do you remember what it's called when your foot kind of like corrects itself automatically? I don't know if it's just a reflex or what. I can't really remember, but I remember touching on it in school. But there'd be times when after I started doing that and you started adjusting my feet and ankles, I just instinctively, reflexively corrected, and I didn't have those sprained ankles that it probably would have produced in the past, or I didn't even have a tweak or anything like that. And just the amount of information that comes in and allows your body to adapt way better when it does come into play with that too.
I don't remember what it was called, but growing up, I mean, obviously everybody usually played some sort of like kickball, tag,
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Did you ever you played those barefoot ever?
Yeah, a couple times.
Okay, I mean that's just generally what we would do where I
Yeah.
grew up. We would just just kind of went outside and played barefoot in the summertime, and kind of going around to like that amount of information that you get back, and like our brain and our body is just so good at processing information without us having to like educationally consciously have to think about processing information.
Right.
Thinking back on it now, I never really started having foot or ankle problems. And I mean, obviously, I had some injuries, but I think those ended up leading to me having issues with my hips and low back too.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
Because I literally was like, I didn't have the stability and motion in my ankles that I initially had and needed. So like everything else, I was reducing my ability to like basically be dynamic.
Right. That maneuverability that you normally would have.
Right. Never had any of those issues though. I mean, obviously your kids growing up playing around, but I never had those types of problems. I know that there's like a catch-22 with that sometimes. Sometimes people get like stress fractures and stuff when their kids on growth plates if they like do too much on like hard surfaces.
Right.
I've heard that before, but
you're outside on the grass and the ground, that's a little bit different too.
Right. One thing I was thinking, I know it's more of just like maybe it is a coincidence, maybe it's not, but the sole of the foot, right? I don't know if that's just a coincidence that they call it the sole.
This is it literally said, the article titled this, it says going barefoot is good for the soul. SOLE.
Dang.
But yeah, I mean that definitely has some portion of it. Before I get into the second half, did you have anything else drop in, bro, that you're thinking of too?
I mean, more so just that right there is that there's no like we're some of our parts, right? And to neglect one and just like disconnect it from whatever its stimulus is, or however it like takes in information, in a way you're kind of reducing your own ability to adapt.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think our feet are a big part of our communication skills subconsciously and just taking in information. Because literally, just like our hands, like it's whatever you believe, but like genetically throughout other species and whatnot too. It's not like you see any other species trying to reduce their ability to take in information with whatever their environment is with the ground, right?
Right.
You take so much information that way. I mean, you can. The vibrational tone of everything. I mean, there's just so much that goes into it. I think it's really overlooked.
I think one thing that I just kind of dropped in a little bit too is we lose our creativity as we get older, and a lot of our not just elderly, but you know, dads, moms, you don't see them as barefoot as maybe you were as a kid, right?
Yeah.
Maybe some of the time, but I think maybe it is almost not a powerhouse, but a powerhouse to the soul and a powerhouse to creativity and being a kid and how we were when we were growing up, you know, playful, adventurous, resorting to just being outside, you know,
very present. That's one thing kids
very present. Yes, yes.
Not like a lack of fear, right? Like kids are fearless. They always talk about kids feeling invincible, and I think that's what some people wear shoes for, is to protect. You know, I mean, talk about steel-toed boots, all that. Like,
yeah,
I don't know about you, but I see plenty of people working that are wearing these big boots that are meant to protect, clunky, and they have a bunch of foot issues. I mean, I know they need to protect it from
9 times out of 10. Yeah,
they need to be protected from having stuff drop and land on their foot for sure. But I think that there's a certain level of balance they need to like basically counteract that with.
Yeah.
For just like the actual mobility of your feet.
Yeah. That's a fact, man.
I mean, you're not going around just like mannequin hands with everybody, right? like we're not walking around with like just gloves like this all the time,
right?
And if we were, I'm sure we'd have so many more hand and wrist issues than we already do.
Right. Yeah, and we know that the transfer of forces is so crucial, and we put it somewhere else. Like you said, we like to protect, but it ends up doing more damage than I think we can sometimes realize. So. And they touched on that too. Today we add comfort, but we reduce functionality. We reduce our ability to function to our highest potential.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You said you have a second half?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a smaller section, but
okay.
Dr. Leilani? Oh no, you're okay.
All right, I just didn't know what that was. So then we have Christian Daoud. Totally butchered his name.
That's
name. I don't know. Senior lecturer in musculoskeletal biology at the University of Liverpool, England. Says that and I love this part. The foot is one of the least understood structures in the body because of the individual variation and the complexity of foot bones, ligaments, and because of what happens inside the foot is impossible to see. And just like thinking about that, how much variation do we have in not only the appearance of feet, but foot structure, ligamentous, muscular, tendon, you know, even up to the ankle. Some people got requirements. Some people got thin ankles. Some people got them cankles, you know, just there's so much variation that we can't, it's complex. And when you have 52 bones in an area, it's going to be more complex. It's going to be, and in the sense of too, when we talk about more bones, like let's think about the wrist. You have your carpal bones for mobility, right?
Yep.
Well, the foot needs mobility and stability at the same time.
Yes, it does.
In different areas, but they're so closely related, so closely interconnected. It's a very complex portion, one that little to no people understand fully, probably, because I would argue podiatrists don't really understand it because the majority of my foot information has never been from a podiatrist.
Right.
In fact, when I have gone the route, it's been more pain. And then it's so much of what happens inside the foot is impossible to see. And that's so true. Because you can't really, cadavers aren't going to do it justice because it's not weighted or anything like that. I don't know. I just thought that was really cool.
No, dude, I love that. I think it's pretty amazing. I mean, our body never does anything by accident or by random. Right. And it's by no accident that we have 25% of our bones in our body in our feet. And our feet literally, bones are meant to A, protect, and B, move. Like joints, right?
Right.
That's like their function, essentially.
And taking information, too.
Yes, of course.
External, right?
Yep. So I think
effective.
I think that's, that in itself should be like leaned into, right? Not something that should be
disposed of.
Yeah, disposed of and putting like a kind of like a muffle on it, right?
Right. I kind of like what you said earlier, similar to the soundproofing of a room. If you're soundproofing those feet, then it's not able to do all the things that it needs to do.
Yeah. I think with that connection aspect of like soundproofing your feet, and obviously I was talking more with like the frequency of the earth, but literally just to your environmental stimulus.
Yeah.
Where you're just you're putting a cap on your potential to adapt. That you're just like creating like a static environment for your foot.
Yep.
Right. And
100%.
when you're not able to like, that's like part of like the stability of an ankle is like subconsciously like have reflexes or inherent ability to like understand like a foot position and like where the force is going and to correct that before an injury happens. And when you have a thicker shoe or whatever, you just have less information, so it's even easier to like hurt your foot or to not move in a correct way. That's I mean, like everything else, man. The curves of the back, the curves of the spine, lordotic and kyphotic, are meant to help distribute forces and weight. The arches of the feet, three arches of the feet. Most people don't know we got three, right? And those are all meant to disperse force in different ways and be dynamic. Right. And I think that's lost all the time.
Yep, that's fact.
So that's what we get to work on. True. Yeah, and I'm working with Dr. Malley, helping somebody restore those arches and that arch stability. When you talk about rebuilding the curve in a spine, same thing with rebuilding the arches in the feet. Yeah. It's really important.
Right. That's awesome. I like that analogy too. It's a foot spine.
Foot spine, right there. Foot curves.
Curves. Love your foot curves. Purely for foot pics.
Yes, sir. Gates, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, just two more quick things.
Okay.
In one of the research studies, they had people try minimal shoes for 6 months, and although they were uncomfortable at first, quite a few people prefer them. So a little bit of minimal uncomfortability at the beginning, but then you do realize that you end up liking them a little bit more. And just talking about how the shoes can be somewhat invasive, but he sometimes wears regular shoes because it's wet and gloomy in Liverpool. So, but the research is there, and I think what's really cool as we understand more about comfort versus versatility and usability, the more I think the more and more we return the human, the more we recognize the versatility that we're capable of, the more we can actually inherently adapt better and inherently live a life that's more fulfilling. And it starts with just taking that step outside, no shoes, nothing invasive, nothing to
literally and figuratively taking that step.
Literally and figuratively. And I think in connection, intention, and purpose, the feet are a huge portion of that. So go out there and make it happen, guys. It'll pay dividends for sure.
Yeah, going off that, man, I think that you can fulfill all three categories of connection, intention, and purpose just by with your feet alone, right?
Yeah.
Because to go anywhere, you got to have purpose. You know, if you don't have any purpose of what you're to walk from here to the kitchen, or to run from here to there, or to jump, you got to have a purpose to why you're doing what you're doing. Otherwise, it just literally doesn't happen, right?
Right.
And that connection and intention too. Intention goes a little bit more inherently with purpose, but that connection, I think what we talked about today, that just is it's a perfect analogy for making a connection is with the feet.
100%.
And
what a way to start your day too.
Oh yeah, I think one thing that I was just thinking about right before we get finishing up here. So regulating body temperature. Sometimes your feet are a big component of that. I know, like, one of the things that I was told growing up, if you start getting sick, go to sleep with socks on, because you're going to be able to maintain a higher body temperature.
Right.
So I think that just kind of going back around and round and round, but neglecting your feet, your foot potential for body regulation, don't sleep on it, right? And we still don't understand it completely.
Right.
So thank you so much for sharing what you did, dude. I
for sure, brother.
I know I got a shit ton out of it, and I hope everybody else did too, because that was some really good information you dropped today.
Yeah, dude, for sure, no problem. Go barefoot and get your feet adjusted, y'all.
Ooh, Vivo Barefoot. That's a barefoot shoe company, and also there's this company. I think they're really called Barefoot.
Oh, true.
They're a little bit cheaper than Vivo.
Vivo's pretty expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that they're still a little bit on the pricier side, but they're cheaper than Vivo. I've checked them out. I haven't bought any myself yet, but check those guys out too, because those are two quality companies that if you want to start, I mean, obviously, I'm not telling anybody to go outside and run a mile barefoot right away, but
it's a start.
Nice transition. So,
and if anybody has any link to some moccasins, your boy's looking for some moccasins.
Totally. So the barefoot are more moccasin style.
But I like traditional moccasins, man. Okay. I want I don't know, maybe something about. I got a lot of appreciation for Native American culture, and I think I love it. It'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Not appropriation.
No, it's appreciation.
Yep.
Cool. All right, brother. Well, thank you, Good Fighters Fight Club.
Fight Club.
You know how to find us at the_good_fight_ers.
Boom.
Also at DC_Nash_T and Gates. Which one do you prefer them to follow you at, Dr. Gates?
Gatesmare at Gatesmare_DC.
Right on, brother. Well,
preferred.
Appreciate y'all and taking the time to listen to today's episode, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again.